So we went and looked at the window, and then he walked inside, and I didn't know who he was. And he's sitting in the back of the room, and he sits there for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and he leaves. Didn't think much about it. Until 2 weeks later, Ron and I get a note saying, could you come down to Somers, because we want to talk to you about demo technology. And we said, oh, okay, we've never been to headquarters before. Wow. And remember, we got to the airport, we're driving up the road, and we see the pyramids on the hill, and we're like, oh, look where we are. We're like giddy. Like, this is so exciting. So we walk in and we sit down, and this fellow's name is Mike Roden. And the very first words out of his mouth are, what would it take for me to convince you guys to do what you do on a worldwide basis? And I kind of look at Ron, and he looks at me, and I look back at Ron, and he kind of nods like this, and I look straight at Mike and I say, 128 extra K for our ThinkPads. Mike kind of sits back and says, I could do that. So they brought us on assignment.
What do you think?
They brought us on assignment down to the States for ostensibly 2 years.
So what year was this that you?
This was 99 or so.
Rolling Web demo in 1999.
Yeah, well, actually, we started probably in 97, 98. It was pretty avant-garde at the time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, but there you go. And so then, as Mike's career kind of advanced, he would always kind of pull me behind him, and ultimately, when he became general manager of Lotus, I was the director of technical strategy for software group across the board, and he asked me to come in to take over the strategy function at Lotus, and promised me some exciting times. So I've been here.
They've been delivered, huh?
Yeah, well, certainly we do live in interesting times, and certainly the last 3 years in Lotus brand and the transformation we've gone through, and the expansion of our portfolio, and the interlinkage of all the different pieces, it's been tremendously exciting.
So what led you to the strategy role from there? I mean, obviously Mike invited you. What was appealing about it to you?
Well, but the first strategy role he asked me to take on was when he was running development in the pervasive computing division. I had been doing some work with the server group, helping them do the rebranding to the I-series and dealing with the emergence of Linux as a common platform for our systems. And he asked me to come over and do standards work in the pervasive computing division. And I founded and became the chairman of the board of the SyncML initiative, and did a lot of work in the international standards space, and spent a lot of time in Europe. I love doing strategy work because it's a creative endeavor. You're not necessarily shackled and bound by the normal kind of constraints. When people say you can't do something, you say, well, I'm making it up anyway. What do you mean I can't do anything? No, that, to be perfectly honest, there are obviously certain constraints you have to live within, but you get to push the boundaries. You also get to work with incredibly smart people, and you spend a lot of time with research. And one of the wonderful things about working for a company like IBM is just the profound depth of skill and expertise and insight in really, really smart people. And figuring out what the world's going to look like in a few years and what the competitive landscape is doing is just a tremendously exciting intellectual activity. So being involved in a strategy function that not only has to kind of plot the trajectory of some of the underlying technologies, what's the availability of bandwidth in different geographies at different times, with what kinds of reliability, and how fast our processors are going to be, and what's going to happen when memory shrinks to a certain size, and all those kinds of normal, science, material science-based kind of questions. But how are social patterns going to change? Right? What is happening as the demographics shift, and what kind of predispositions do new groups of people bring to the marketplace? And by the way, they're different country by country, and even industry by industry. And so looking at that landscape and trying to project and figure out where new value is going to be created, and then come up with ideas about how to participate in that value creation and monetize part of it for the benefit of our company is really exciting. We've now launched into many of these green initiatives and the Smarter Planet initiatives. It's going to take an awful lot of very bright people, very creative people to go and solve some of these things. And an awful lot of it has to do with allowing really smart people to work with each other, communicate with each other, discover each other, find a good idea, build on it, iterate it, promote it in an organization, and then turn it into something real that makes a real impact. Being part of thinking of how all these things come together to tackle these really big issues is not only very exciting, but it's in many ways very fulfilling.
So to talk a little bit more about that actual day-to-day role, you know, that description of your job, I'd like a little more detail on, like, how do you work with the product teams? What's your relationship between your office and, say, the guys that design connections, the guys that's actually the people that are actually building the next version of the product?
Sure. There are some formal and some informal mechanisms that we use to do that interaction. Some of the informal mechanisms are actually quite interesting. I myself mentor various different people, including technical people, across the organization, and we use those mentoring sessions, and I've got contacts in different laboratories around the world, to cross-pollinate. They are fascinated with the things we're working on. I'm fascinated to understand, you know, what's going on inside the laboratory, and that cross-pollination is, you know, allows both parts of the equation to have a more mature view of the whole. I work very closely with Bob and his direct report team, where either in some of our, you know, internal board meetings and operations meetings, you know, I participate in all those conversations and bring forward new ideas where that leadership team debates them and will then often allocate some of their own resource. Like, I'll bring an idea, a challenge, a new project, and I'll put it forward and say, this is something that I think we should work on, but we're going to need some resource. We need some bright people that are going to be able to tackle, you know, the technical aspect and the business development aspect and the go-to-market aspect and the standards landscape aspect, and they will all volunteer members of their teams to participate in one of the strategy projects. And then I'll bring in some people from research and some people from some other divisions, and we put them together and we create these virtual task forces that involve members of each of those communities. And that's useful for two reasons. Number one, we bring all kinds of different perspectives to bear, and hopefully we come up with better answers because of that. But number two, because they're involved, we're also cross-pollinating out the thinking that's going on in these task forces into all of those groups. And that's providing us some ability to get all of the groups to kind of work together and cooperate. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, when you look at some of the demonstrations we've been doing here at Lotus Sphere, you know, it almost looks like it's one big product, because you can kind of move from notes into same time, into connections, up into Lotus Live, and over into Quicker in this really integrated, seamless kind of way that all the pieces are, you know, complementing each other and kind of fitting together in a pretty elegant framework.
So, thinking that there's no real complete strategy if you're not also figuring out how you're actually going to sell it, how do you relate to the marketing teams within Lotus as well?
Oh, another good question. So, I spent a lot of time with Kirsten and with Marjorie before her on doing things like messaging. So as we're building any one of our campaigns, or trying to develop, you know, glossy brochures or come up with the messaging or whatever, many members of my team and myself often are kind of seconded into their teams.
How do you then, within your role, work with the IBM software group as a whole? Obviously you have to integrate with them.
Yeah. So there is another level. Well, actually it happens both at the IBM software group level and at the IBM corporate level. At both of those levels, there are other instantiations of this task force kind of construct. So right now, one of the most active ones is a cloud computing task force. That is, and there's a layer of it at the corporate level, and then there's a layer of it at the software level, and then we actually have our own layer inside of Lotus. And in many ways, we're actually leading a lot of the initiative across the company because of all the technology we've built to support Lotus Live. But these councils, you know, we meet every number of weeks, and they're very long sessions and involve a lot of animated discussion. And we all stand up and present our piece of it and debate and argue things and do competitive analysis. And you don't stop.